The sledgehammer crashed into the concrete with a thunderous crack that echoed through the suburban morning. Karen's shrill laughter pierced the air from her kitchen window as she watched her neighbor destroy what had taken him 3 years to build. Finally giving up, loser, she called out, recording every swing on her phone. But as Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow and looked up at her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, Karen had no idea she was about to become the star of her own nightmare. Sometimes the quiet ones don't just get even, they get creative. The first crack appeared in Marcus Chen's concrete pool deck at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in late September, spiderwebbing outward like frozen lightning across 3 years of backbreaking work. He knelt beside it, running his fingers along the jagged line that split straight through the elaborate mosaic he'd spent 18 months perfecting, each tiny blue and white tile carefully placed by hand during weekends and stolen evening hours. After his 12-hour shifts at the engineering firm. "Goddamn tree roots," he whispered, tracing the damage back to its source, the massive oak that straddled the property line between his modest ranch house and the McMansion next door. The same tree that Karen Whitmore had refused to trim despite 5 years of polite requests, 3 certified letters, and 2 visits from a professional arborist who'd warned that the aggressive root system would eventually destroy any hardscaping. Within a 30-foot radius. The irony wasn't lost on him. As a structural engineer, Marcus had calculated every load, every stress point, every potential failure in his pool design. He'd over-engineered the foundation, used premium materials, followed every code to the letter. But he couldn't engineer his way around a neighbor who viewed property line disputes as blood sport. Karen problems again. Marcus looked up to find Jim Patterson, his neighbor on the other side, peering over their shared fence. Jim was 73, a retired postal worker whose primary entertainment came from his front porch and an encyclopedic knowledge of everyone's business within a 4-block radius. "The tree finally won," Marcus said, standing and brushing concrete. Dust from his knees. 5 years of asking nicely, and now I've got a pool that's going to collapse into a sinkhole by Christmas. Jim's weathered face creased into something between sympathy and amusement. You know what Karen's going to say. That it's not her problem because the roots are on my side of the property line. Marcus had heard the argument before, delivered, with Karen's signature blend of legal-sounding buzzwords and barely concealed contempt. Even though the tree's been there since before either of us bought our houses. You could take her to court. With what money? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Between the divorce settlement and putting Emma through college, I'm lucky I can afford the pool chemicals. A lawsuit would bankrupt me before we even got to discovery. The sliding glass door across the yard opened with a sharp bang, and Karen Whitmore stepped onto her expansive deck like a queen surveying her domain. At 45, she maintained the kind of aggressive fitness that came from daily Pilates classes and twice-weekly sessions with a personal trainer named Chad. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail that seemed to stretch her features into permanent disapproval, and even at 7 in the morning, she was dressed in workout gear that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly grocery budget. "Morning, Marcus," she called out, her voice carrying that particular pitch that managed to sound both cheerful and condescending. "Pool problems." "Just some settling," Marcus replied evenly. He'd learned over the years that Karen fed on conflict like a shark sensing blood in the water. The calmer he remained, the less ammunition she had. That's what happens when you don't hire professionals. Karen descended her deck steps with deliberate casualness, stopping just short of the property line. "I told you from the beginning that a DIY pool was a mistake, but you just had to prove you could do it yourself. The pool's fine, Karen. It's the tree roots that are the problem." "My tree roots." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "That's rich. The tree is clearly on the property line, which makes it a shared responsibility. But the roots that are allegedly causing your problems are entirely on your side of the line. Not my circus, not my monkeys." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. 5 years of this. 5 years of Karen's pseudo-legal arguments, her selective interpretation of property laws, her absolute refusal to acknowledge that being technically correct wasn't the same as being a decent human being. "The arborist said," "The arborist you hired," Karen interrupted. "Hardly an unbiased opinion. If you want my half of the tree trimmed, you're welcome to pay for an independent evaluation. Of course, you'd also need my written permission to have anyone work on my side of the property line. Which, given your history of making assumptions about what you're entitled to, I'm not inclined to provide. The crack in the concrete seemed to widen as Marcus stared at it. 3 years. 3 years of weekends spent mixing concrete, laying rebar, installing plumbing. 3 years of Emma helping him pick out tiles during her Christmas breaks from State University, both of them dreaming about pool parties and summer barbecues. 3 years of work that was now literally crumbling because Karen Whitmore couldn't be bothered to trim a tree. You know what, Karen? Marcus straightened up, and something in his voice made Jim Patterson lean forward against the fence. You're absolutely right. Karen blinked, clearly thrown by his sudden agreement. What? You're right. The tree is your property, your responsibility, your call. Just like this pool is mine. Marcus gestured toward the cracked concrete, the sparkling water, the elaborate deck setup he'd built with his own hands. All mine to do with as I please. Obviously, Karen said slowly, suspicion creeping into her voice. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket and opened his contacts list. Because I've got some calls to make. What kind of calls? But Marcus was already walking toward his house, leaving Karen standing at the property line with a confused expression and the growing sense that she'd just won a battle she wasn't sure she'd wanted to fight. The first call was to Rodriguez Demolition, a company Marcus had worked with on several commercial projects. The second was to his daughter Emma, currently in her senior year studying environmental law. The third was to his lawyer, a sharp woman named Janet Pierce who specialized in property disputes and had been waiting 5 years for Marcus to stop playing nice, and the fourth call was to the Homeowners Association, specifically to report a violation of Section 12.3 of the HOA covenant, failure to maintain landscaping that impacts neighboring properties to be why the time Karen figured out what Marcus Chen was planning, it would be far too late to stop him. But as he scrolled through the HOA regulations on his tablet, looking for every technical violation he could find, Marcus allowed himself the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. After all, Karen had taught him everything he needed to know about playing by the rules. The sledgehammer arrived with the demolition crew at sunrise the next morning, and Karen Whitmore's laughter died in her throat when she realized that sometimes the quiet ones don't just break, they rebuild everything. From the ground up. The sledgehammer felt heavier than Marcus had expected, its weight settling into his palms like destiny made manifest. At 6:15 a.m., the suburban morning was still wrapped in the kind of quiet that made every sound seem amplified, the distant hum of Rodriguez's diesel truck idling in his driveway, the soft whisper of sprinklers across manicured lawns, the rhythmic chirping of Karen's security system as she armed it for her daily departure to CrossFit. You sure about this, boss? Miguel. Rodriguez stepped out of his truck, adjusting the brim of his hard hat. At 52, Miguel had demolished everything from strip malls to historic theaters, but he'd never seen a homeowner personally take the first swing at destroying something they'd built with their own hands. Pools in perfect condition. Shame. To tear it down. The foundation's compromised, Marcus said, hefting the sledgehammer and feeling its balance. Better to control the demolition than wait for it to collapse on its own. Miguel nodded, though his expression suggested he'd heard stranger reasons for demo jobs. Your money, your call. We'll have the whole thing cleared out by Friday, concrete. Recycled, topsoil brought in. You want us to save any of the tile work. Marcus looked at the mosaic border he'd spent 18 months perfecting, each piece carefully selected, arranged, and grouted with the kind of obsessive attention that had driven his ex-wife Sarah to distraction. No. When we are done, I don't want anything left. The first swing came at 6:47 a.m., precisely 1 week after the initial crack had appeared. The sledgehammer connected with the concrete deck in a thunderous impact that sent vibrations through the ground and rattled windows for 3 houses in every direction. The sound was magnificent, pure destruction wrapped in purpose, the kind of noise that announced to the world that something fundamental was changing. Karen's sliding glass door flew open before the echo had faded. What the hell are you doing? She stormed across her perfectly manicured backyard in yoga pants and a sports bra, her phone already in her hand and recording. It's not even 7 a.m. There are noise ordinances. Marcus paused, the sledgehammer resting against his shoulder, and smiled. Good morning, Karen. Beautiful day for a demolition, don't you think? You can't just. She stopped at the property line, her camera capturing every angle of the destruction as Miguel's crew began setting up their equipment. This is insane. You're destroying a perfectly good pool. My pool, Marcus corrected, taking another swing. This one opened a 3-foot crack through the shallow end steps. On my property. With the proper permits. Karen's face flushed the particular shade of red that meant she was about to escalate to DEFCON 1. The noise violations alone. Construction is permitted between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays, Marcus interrupted, pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead. I checked. With the city. Twice. But why? The question came out as almost a wail, her phone still recording as chunks of concrete tumbled into the crystal clear water. This is beautiful. You spent 3 years building this. And now I'm spending 3 days tearing it down. Marcus gestured toward the oak tree that loomed over both their properties, its massive canopy casting shadows across the destruction. Turns out when you build something on a compromised foundation, sometimes the smartest thing to do is start over. He took another swing, and this time Karen actually flinched at the sound. You're doing this to spite me, she said, her voice dropping to the dangerous whisper she used when she was transitioning from angry to vindictive. This whole thing is because I won't trim my tree. Your tree, your choice, Marcus replied, echoing her words from the day before. My pool, my choice. Miguel approached with a clipboard and a bemused expression. Mrs. Whitmore, right? You might want to move your car. When we bring in the excavator, we are going to need access to their side yard. Excavator. Karen's voice cracked. How big is this project? Complete tear-out and landscape restoration, Miguel explained professionally. Mr. Chen's going for a full renovation. Very thorough guy. Most people would just patch the cracks and hope for the best, but he wants to do it right. Marcus caught Miguel's eye and nodded slightly. They'd discussed the story during their planning meeting. A complete renovation, new design, better foundation. All technically true, even if it wasn't the complete truth. Karen's phone was still recording as she backed away from the property. Line. This is harassment. I'm calling the HOA. Good idea, Marcus said, taking another swing. Ask them about the landscaping violation notice they sent you yesterday. Section 12.3 is pretty clear about maintaining trees that impact neighboring properties. The sledgehammer connected with the pool's edge, sending a chunk of decorative coping flying into the shallow end with a splash that sent ripples across the surface. Karen's face went white. What landscaping violation? Should be in your mailbox. Certified mail, signature required. Marcus paused his demolition to pull a folded paper from his back pocket. I've got a copy right here, if you'd like to see it. Karen snatched the paper from his hand, her eyes scanning the official HOA letterhead with growing horror. They can't. The tree's been there for 30 years. And it's been dropping leaves in the community storm drains for 30 years, Marcus replied. Plus the root damage to sidewalks, the impact on neighboring properties, the fact that it needs professional trimming to prevent branches from falling on power lines during storms. Amazing what you find when you actually read the covenants. The paper trembled in Karen's hands. This says I have 30 days to provide a certified arborist's report and a remediation plan, or face daily fines of $200. Plus attorney fees if it goes to a hearing, Marcus added helpfully. But I'm sure it won't come to that. You're very good at following rules when they apply to you. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For 5 years, she'd wielded the HOA covenants like a weapon, filing complaints about Marcus's mailbox placement, his garbage, can storage, the height of his grass during his vacation week. She'd memorized every subsection that could be used to make her neighbors' lives more difficult, but she'd never bothered to read section 12.3. You son of a bitch, she whispered. Language. Karen. This is a family neighborhood. Marcus hefted. The sledgehammer again. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a pool to demolish. Lots of work ahead if I want to get this foundation properly prepared. Prepared for what? Marcus smiled, and for the first time in 5 years, he had Karen Whitmore's complete and undivided attention. Well, that depends on a lot of factors. Property lines, root systems, local regulations. I've got some very interesting plans, but they're still in the development phase. He took another swing, and this time the crack ran the entire length of the pool's eastern wall, the side closest to Karen's property line. You can't build anything that violates setback requirements Karen said quickly. There are rules about structures within 10 feet of the property line. Absolutely right. Good thing I know a structural engineer who's very familiar with setback requirements. Marcus paused to examine the damage, then looked directly at Karen. Did you know that certain types of landscaping features don't count as structures under the municipal code? Things like retaining walls, drainage systems, decorative earthworks. Very interesting reading, if you're into that sort of thing. Karen's face had progressed from red to white to a sickly green shade that matched her perfectly coordinated outdoor furniture. What are you planning? Nothing illegal, Marcus assured her. Nothing that violates a single code, covenant, or regulation. I'm very careful about following rules. The demolition continued as Karen stood frozen at the property line, her phone forgotten in her hand as she watched 3 years of Marcus's work disappear under sledgehammers and jackhammers. The sound was relentless, a percussion symphony of destruction that seemed to echo off every house in the neighborhood. By noon, the entire shallow end was rubble. By 3 p.m., the deep end was gone. By closing time, nothing remained but a gaping hole in the ground and Karen Whitmore standing in her kitchen window, staring at the crater where her neighbor's beautiful pool had been just 8 hours earlier. As Miguel's crew loaded their equipment and headed home, Marcus stood at the edge of the excavation and pulled out his phone. Emma answered on the second ring. Dad, how did it go? Phase 1 complete, Marcus said, looking up at Karen's window where a silhouette watched from behind expensive curtains. Your research on environmental law was perfect. The HOA violation notice was delivered right on schedule. And she took the bait. Marcus smiled as Karen's shadow disappeared from the window. Hook, line, and sinker. She's so focused on what I might build next that she hasn't even started thinking about what that violation notice is going to cost her. $200. A day adds up fast. Especially when you factor in the legal fees for the eventual hearing, and the cost of hiring a certified arborist, and the price of professional tree trimming for a 30-year-old oak. Marcus kicked a chunk of concrete into the hole. By my calculations, she's looking at somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 if she fights this all the way. To the end. Or she could just trim the tree. She could, Marcus agreed. But that would require admitting she was wrong. And we both know Karen Whitmore would rather burn down the neighborhood than admit she. The certified letter arrived in Karen's mailbox at 10:47 a.m. on Thursday, delivered by a postal worker who seemed to take particular pleasure in requiring her signature. Karen stood in her marble foyer, still in her Lululemon workout gear, staring at the official city seal embossed on heavy cream paper that felt like a death warrant in her manicured hands. Notice of environmental impact assessment required a tree removal a modification permit application #2024 ENV 3847 property owner. Whitmore, Karen J. Subject property, 1247 Willowbrook Drive. This notice serves to inform you that a permit application has been filed requesting environmental assessment of proposed tree removal a modification on the above referenced property. As the tree in question, Quercus alba, approximately 30 years mature, is classified as a heritage oak under Municipal Code Section 18.4.3, any modification or removal requires. The paper trembled as Karen read the dense legal text, each paragraph more devastating than the last. Environmental impact studies, soil erosion assessments, wildlife habitat evaluations, root system mapping by a certified arborist. And at the bottom, in bold print that seemed to leap off the page, estimated cost of required assessments, $12,000-$18,000 note. These costs are the responsibility of the property owner regardless of permit approval or denial. Son of a bitch. Karen whispered, then immediately looked around to make sure her housekeeper wasn't within earshot. Maria had a tendency to gossip with the other domestic workers in the neighborhood, and the last thing Karen needed was her private business becoming public entertainment. Her phone buzzed with a text from her husband Brad, currently in Denver. Closing a commercial real estate deal. How's the tree situation? Thought you said it wasn't your problem. Karen's fingers hovered over the keyboard. For 3 days, she'd been telling Brad that Marcus was having some kind of midlife crisis breakdown, that the pool demolition was just a tantrum that would blow over. She'd been so confident in her position, so certain that property law was on her side, she hadn't mentioned the HOA violation notice. She definitely hadn't mentioned this. Still handling it, she typed back. Nothing I can't manage. Through her kitchen window, Karen could see Marcus's backyard, where the excavation had grown deeper and more elaborate overnight. What had started as a simple pool removal now looked like an archaeological dig, with measuring stakes and survey markers scattered around the perimeter. Two men in hard hats were taking measurements and making notes on clipboards. While Marcus stood nearby with rolled blueprints under his arm, Karen grabbed her phone and stalked outside, her designer sneakers clicking against a deck's composite. Planking. Marcus. What the hell is this environmental assessment notice? Marcus looked up from his conversation with the surveyors, his expression mild and perfectly reasonable. Oh, that. Yeah, the city requires environmental review for any tree work on heritage oaks. Didn't you know yours was classified as heritage? Of course I didn't know. Why would I know that? Well, you should probably find out these things before you refuse. To maintain them, Marcus said gently. Heritage trees have special protection status. Makes sense when you think about it. 30-year-old oak, mature canopy, significant environmental impact. The city takes that stuff pretty seriously. Karen felt something cold settle in her stomach. You filed this permit application. Had to. The HOA violation notice requires a certified remediation plan within 30 days. Remember? Can't get a remediation plan without proper permits. And you can't get permits without environmental assessment. Marcus shrugged. Just following the process. This is harassment. This is bureaucracy, Marcus corrected. I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're very good at navigating official processes when they benefit you. One of the surveyors approached with his clipboard. Mr. Chen, we've got the preliminary measurements. You want to review the proposed site boundaries? Absolutely. Marcus unrolled his blueprints on a folding table that had appeared from somewhere, weighing down the corners with chunks of concrete from his demolished pool. Karen, you might find this interesting. Professional courtesy and all. Despite every instinct screaming at her to walk away, Karen found herself drawn to the table. The blueprints were incredibly detailed. Topographical surveys, soil composition analyses, drainage patterns, root system projections. And in the center, outlined in bold blue ink, was something that made her blood turn to ice water. What is that? She whispered. Phase 2 of the renovation, Marcus said proudly. Pretty ambitious, right? The drawing showed a massive water feature, not a simple swimming pool, but an elaborate naturalistic pond system with waterfalls, rock formations, and what appeared to be a stream running the entire length of his backyard. The design was beautiful, sophisticated, and positioned precisely 18 inches from the property line. You can't build that, Karen said automatically. Setback requirements don't apply to water features classified as natural landscaping, Marcus interrupted. I checked. Very thoroughly. As long as the water depth doesn't exceed 4 feet at any point, and the design incorporates native plant species for erosion control, it falls under ornamental landscaping rather than structure construction. Karen stared at the blueprints, her mind racing through the implications. A naturalistic pond system with waterfalls would require massive excavation, industrial pumps, professional lighting. The construction noise alone would be unbearable. And the constant sound of running water, the noise ordinance, natural water features are specifically exempted, Marcus said helpfully. Municipal Code Section 9.2.7. Flowing water is classified as ambient natural sound, like wind chimes or garden fountains. No decibel restrictions. This is insane. You're talking about months of construction, tens of thousands of dollars. Actually, the contractor estimates about 6 weeks for the excavation and hardscaping, then another 4 weeks for the water systems and landscaping. Marcus pointed to various elements on the blueprint. The waterfalls will be here, here, and here. Pumps housed in this underground mechanical room. The stream will flow year-round, fed by a recirculating system with natural filtration. Karen's mouth had gone completely dry. How much is this costing? You. Less than you might think. I'm doing a lot of the work myself, and I've got connections in the construction industry. Marcus smiled. Besides, this is an investment. Natural water features can add significant value to a property. And the tree. Karen's voice came out as barely a whisper. What about it? Your pond. It's going to destroy the root system. Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. How could it destroy the root system? The excavation is entirely on my property. I'm not touching your tree. But the roots extend into my property, Marcus finished. Which, as you've explained to me many times, makes them my problem to deal with. I'm not cutting down your tree, Karen. I'm just landscaping around the natural drainage patterns on my side of the property line. The surveyor cleared his throat. Mr. Chen, we should probably discuss the drainage implications. With this much water feature, you're going to need serious overflow management. The city's going to want detailed grading plans. Already handled, Marcus said, producing another set of blueprints. Natural drainage will flow toward the street, following existing grade patterns. Any overflow from storm events will be channeled through this bioswale system here. Karen looked at the drainage plans and felt her knees go weak. The bioswale, a natural depression designed to handle water runoff, ran directly along the property line. Any root system extending from her tree into Marcus's yard would be completely severed by the excavation. You're going to kill my tree, she said. I'm going to landscape my property according to proper drainage principles, Marcus corrected. What happens to root systems that have grown beyond their property boundaries isn't really my concern. As you've told me many times, that's your problem to manage. Karen stared at the blueprints, seeing her 30-year-old heritage oak slowly dying as its root system was systematically destroyed by Marcus's natural landscaping. Without those roots, the massive tree would become unstable, potentially dangerous. The city would require its removal, which would cost another $15,000. Minimum. You bastard, she whispered. Language, Karen. Marcus began rolling up his blueprints. Now, I should probably mention that construction starts Monday. The excavation crew will be here around 7 a.m. I hope the noise won't be too disruptive. Construction noise ordinances permit all construction activities between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays, Marcus said patiently. I pulled the permits yesterday. Everything's completely legal. Karen's phone buzzed with another text from Brad. Dinner with the Denver clients running late. Won't be home until Sunday. Handle whatever tree drama is happening. Can't be that complicated. She looked at the message, then at Marcus's smiling face, then at the gaping hole where his pool used to be. $18,000 for environmental assessments. 6 weeks of construction noise starting at 7 a.m. every morning. A heritage oak that would slowly die as its root system was destroyed by natural landscaping. Daily HOA fines until she provided a remediation plan she couldn't afford to implement. What do you want? She asked quietly. Marcus tilted his head. I'm sorry. What do you want to make this go away? I don't know what you mean. Part 4. The a sound that woke Karen at 6:58 a.m. on Monday morning wasn't quite like anything she'd ever heard before. A deep, mechanical growling that seemed to vibrate through her Italian marble floors and expensive Egyptian cotton sheets. For a moment, suspended in that hazy space between sleep and consciousness, she thought it might be thunder from an approaching storm. Then she remembered. Karen bolted upright, her silk pajamas twisted around her legs as she scrambled to the bedroom window. In Marcus's backyard, a massive excavator sat like a yellow dinosaur, its engine idling while the operator performed his pre-work safety checks. Behind it, a convoy of dump trucks stretched down Willowbrook Drive, their diesel engines adding to the mechanical symphony. No, she whispered, pressing her face against the glass. No, no, no. At exactly 7 a.m., the excavator's bucket bit into the earth with a grinding roar that shook her windows. The operator, a man with arms like tree trunks and the focused expression of someone who took pride in precision destruction, began carving into Marcus's backyard with surgical accuracy. Each scoop removed another cubic yard of soil, each movement bringing the excavation closer to the property line, closer to her tree's root system. Karen's phone buzzed with a call from Brad. She let it go to voicemail, then immediately listened to the message. Jesus Christ, Karen, what's all that noise? The neighbors are calling me about construction starting at 7 a.m. I thought you said you had this handled. Call me back. She didn't call back. Instead, she threw on the first clothes she could find, yesterday's yoga pants and a wrinkled t-shirt, and stumbled outside into the morning chaos. The construction noise was even worse in the open air, a relentless assault of diesel engines, hydraulic systems, and steel against earth. Marcus stood near the excavation site wearing work boots and a hard hat, consulting with the operator and pointing toward specific areas marked with orange spray paint. He looked completely at ease, like a man watching his dreams take physical form one bucket load at a time. Marcus. Karen had to shout to be heard over the machinery. This is insane. It's been 2 minutes and I can't think straight. Marcus walked over to the property line, his expression sympathetic but unmoved. I know it's loud, but it's temporary. The heavy excavation should be done by the end of the week. The end of the week. Karen's voice cracked. 5 days of this. Actually, probably closer to 10 days. We are digging deeper than originally planned. Found some interesting drainage issues that need to be addressed. Marcus gestured toward the growing pit. But once the excavation's complete, the noise level drops significantly. The waterfall installation is much quieter. Karen stared at the excavation, which had already grown to the size of her living room and showed no signs of slowing down. How deep is this going? Final depth will be about 8 feet in the main pond area, tapering to 4 feet for the stream. Sections. We need the depth for proper water circulation and to accommodate the filtration systems. 8 feet. Karen's voice rose to a near shriek. You're digging an 8-foot hole 20 feet from my house. 18 feet, Marcus corrected. And don't worry about structural impact. I had a geotechnical engineer do soil analysis. Your foundation won't be affected. But Karen wasn't worried about her foundation. She was staring at the massive root system of her heritage oak, now partially exposed by the excavation. The roots were even more extensive than she'd imagined, a complex network of woody tentacles that extended far beyond the property line into what was rapidly becoming an aquatic crater. My tree, she whispered. Beautiful root system, Marcus observed, following her gaze. Probably took decades to develop that kind of extensive network. Amazing how far they spread when they're looking for water and nutrients. A dump truck rumbled past, loaded with soil that had been Marcus's backyard an hour earlier. Karen watched it disappear down the street, taking with it another piece of her tree's life support system. You're killing it on purpose, she said. I'm not touching your tree, Marcus replied mildly. Every cut we make is on my side of the property line. Surveyor checked twice to make sure we are in compliance with all setback requirements. But the roots are growing on my property without permission, Marcus finished, which makes them my problem to handle as I see fit. Just like you've always said. The excavator's bucket bit deeper, severing another cluster of roots with mechanical indifference. Each cut was precise, legal, and absolutely devastating to the tree stability. Karen's phone rang again. This time it was a next-door neighbor on the other side, Mrs. Henderson, an 80-year-old widow who'd lived on Willowbrook Drive since the development was built. Karen, dear, I hate to bother you, but this construction noise is making my cat hide under the bed. Do you know how long it's expected to continue? I don't know, Karen said, watching Marcus point out something to the excavator operator. Could be weeks. Weeks? Oh my. Well, I suppose we'll all just have to adjust. Though I must say, Marcus's new water feature sounds lovely. He showed me the plans yesterday. Quite elaborate. It should be beautiful when it's finished. Karen ended the call and immediately dialed the city's noise complaint hotline. The automated system cheerfully informed her that construction noise was permitted between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays, and that all complaints would be investigated within 5 to 7 business days. By the time anyone investigated, damage would be irreversible. Her phone buzzed with a text from Brad, HOA president called. Says you missed the deadline for tree remediation plan. Daily fines start today. What the hell is going on? Karen's hand shook as she typed back, handling it. Don't worry, but she was worried. Terrified, actually. The math was becoming crystal clear, and every calculation led to financial disaster. $200 a day in HOA fines. $18,000 for environmental assessments. $15,000 minimum for professional tree removal once the root damage made it unstable. Legal fees if she tried to fight any of it, and Marcus's construction was just getting started. By noon, the excavation had expanded to encompass nearly half of Marcus's backyard. The exposed root system looked like the circulatory system of some dying giant, major arteries severed and bleeding earth. Karen stood at her kitchen window, watching her 30-year-old heritage oak slowly being murdered by municipal code compliance. The doorbell rang at 12:47 p.m. Karen opened it to find a man in his 50s wearing a clipboard and the kind of patient expression that meant official business. Mrs. Whitmore. I'm Dave Carlson from the city's Environmental Services Department. I'm here about your Heritage Oak assessment. Karen's stomach dropped. What about it? Well, we've had some concerns raised about the tree stability, given the construction activity in the adjacent property. I need to do a preliminary evaluation to determine if emergency intervention might be necessary. Emergency intervention. Tree removal, if the root damage is severe enough to pose a safety hazard. We can't have a 30-year-old oak falling on houses or power lines. Dave Carlson looked past Karen toward her backyard. Mind if I take a look? Karen followed him outside, her legs feeling like rubber. Dave examined the tree's base, made notes on his clipboard, then walked to the property line to observe the excavation. Yeah, he said after a few minutes. This is going to be a problem. What kind of problem? Your tree's root system has been significantly compromised. I'd estimate maybe 30% of the major roots have been severed. Dave pointed toward the excavation, where the exposed root network looked like a medical diagram of trauma. See how the remaining roots are already showing stress? Brown discoloration, wilting at the tips. This tree's going to start declining rapidly. Karen felt tears threatening. How rapidly? Could be weeks, could be months. But it's going to die. And when it does, it'll become a hazard. City's going to require removal before that happens. What if I contest it? Dave shrugged. You can try, but the evidence is pretty clear. And if you wait until it becomes an emergency removal, the costs go up significantly. Emergency tree services charge premium rates. After Dave left, Karen sat on her deck and stared at her dying tree. The construction noise continued relentlessly, a mechanical heartbeat counting down to financial ruin. Each roar of the excavator was another $200 in HOA fines, another day closer to a tree removal bill she couldn't afford. Her phone rang. This time it was Janet Pierce, Marcus's attorney. Mrs. Whitmore. I'm calling regarding the ongoing property dispute with my client, Marcus Chen. I understand you've been experiencing some difficulties with municipal compliance issues. I'm not discussing anything without my own attorney present. Of course, but I wanted to extend an olive branch. Mr. Chen is a reasonable man and has authorized me to discuss a potential resolution that might benefit everyone involved. Karen gripped the phone tighter. What kind of resolution? Well, Mr. Chen's construction project has created an opportunity for property line clarification. There are some survey discrepancies that could be resolved through boundary adjustment, which might address your tree maintenance obligations under the HOA covenant. Karen's heart began to race. You're talking about moving the property line. A minor adjustment, perhaps 3 feet. Your tree would be entirely on Mr. Chen's property, making it his responsibility to maintain according to MO.